think that's working. Give this a minute just to kick in. Are we live? It just says sending data. Says it's stream. Yep, we're streaming. We're streaming on both. This is fantastic because last week when I did this, I discovered that it actually hadn't been streaming to LinkedIn at all. And those of you who have been watching notifications this morning, I tried to do this a few times. And I couldn't. I thought it wasn't working. Apparently it was working. So that's really good. It's very cold in here in my studio. Oh, just checking the sound. That sound's working. This is really good television. This is the thing that stops me just uploading this as a podcast. But I think ultimately everyone's going to have to put up with it while we're all getting our Greggs for breakfast. I think this is going to be the best that I can do. If you just give me one moment. Yeah, so my plan for these is really to do them every Friday evening, about 7 o'clock. But I got stuck on the M1 last night. The traffic was really bad. I didn't get back till late, and here we are. So let me just turn my TikTok off. Again, it's all really good television, but it's only like fourth time I've done it, so I don't really mind being a bit rough around the edges. So on things that I've got on my list to discuss this morning. If anyone is joining me, then they can, of course, pop along with some questions. So last Sunday I launched a merch store. So I had a few ideas for some mugs, put them online, socialised it with all of my very good friends and my close network. And over the week, it hasn't gone that well. I've had 0 sales. That's not very many. And even though all of my very good friends had seen the merch and decided that they weren't going to spend £11 or £12 on a mug. I mean, it's kind of the thing with that print on demand thing is it's really expensive, right? So basically, if I sell a mug for, I think I got them up for 11, it might be £12, but my profit on them is like £1.50 because the mug production isn't too bad, but they're being shipped over from the US, so they're really, really expensive. However, I'm going to try and do, I'm going to commit. I'm going to not just try, I'm going to really commit. I'm going to do one a week, and I've already got tomorrow's one planned, so that is looking pretty hopeful, to be honest. So we're going to get that running on the socials and out. So I've got 2 topics today, obviously as we'll run out of time, I'll have to go on my TikTok and find things that have been picked up. I haven't had a lot go big this week. My follower count's going up, which is great, which is really good. But actually, it's kind of been a bit... It's not disappointing because everyone who's watching it are all lovely people, obviously. But I'd actually say I've probably done better on YouTube Shorts than I had done this week, just looking at it. But we can talk about that. So which one shall we start with? Should we start with the minimum marketable product, or shall we start with the become your own CTO? I think we'll do the become your own CTO. So I saw a post on LinkedIn last night, which was from someone over in the US who was basically saying that you don't need a technical co-founder or a CTO in your tech startup business because you can just learn to code yourself. Now, I sort of am of the opinion that you don't. Do you not need, or do you need? You don't really need a technical co-founder. I think the days when you said I want to do a technology business, do you need a technical co-founder coming in at the start? I don't think you do. And the reason why I don't think you do is because it's the equity that you have to give someone coming in so early doors in a business is very, very expensive. And I think you can, in the very initial early stages, with some advice, be able to close that gap of getting the technical leadership within the business without having to give someone, 20% of your business. You'd be better finding the better pairing for a startup business is to find somebody who's really good at the domain that you're building your business in, and find someone who's really good at selling. And by selling, I mean more of a kind of a classic business development type of selling. And again, I'm kind of skewing this towards B2B SaaS businesses, because most businesses that people start when they've been working in a job for 20 years and they want to kind of jump off and do a second career thing and have their own business, tends to look like a B2B SaaS business. They are the easiest type of business to... They're the easiest type of business to bootstrap, really. So the thing is, with that pairing, do you need a third person in there as a technical co-founder taking a chunk of equity? No, you probably don't. It would make more sense to get more established and have the business be bringing in more revenue, and then you can afford to fund that person from revenue and help them do all the kind of the transformation and the transformative side. That's kind of what I would do. So become your own CTO. This is such a bad take. It's really difficult. Oh, it's really difficult for me not to just get just stop laughing at it. There's been a movement for a long time, maybe 10 years, about the idea that we want to get people learning how to code, and coding isn't what gives you software, right? Do you know, ever since Trump got in power, it's just every time I hear that BBC news, I appreciate he's not now. Like, I'm not that. I'm on the pulse. Every time I hear that noise, I just think it's like a damage report. It's just like, what now? And I feel compelled to look at it. So, yeah, we've obviously been on a bit of a kick to try and get people into coding, and I think that is an really interesting idea. In terms of, is it saying to people, children, young people, or people early career, actually being in STEM is a valuable thing to do, and it is possible to build, you should, it's a nice career to do. Yeah, and I think coding does help with that, but coding is really different to engineering. I'm just going to pull up a Google trend, because I think one of the things that I always describe myself as a software engineer, and my instinct is that most people call software engineers software developers. So let's have a look at that, because one of the things I have a problem with the word developer, because it kind of, even though I've been developing software since I was 8 years old, I still think of software, of developer, as being like sort of a chemical, like a film. Oh god, I'm really showing my age there. Kind of like a something you would put in a still old school film in order to develop it. So let's have a look at software developer. I appreciate this is good TV and no one can see what's on my screen, hopefully. So, actually that's interesting, because I didn't think it was like that. Oh, that's past date. Let's have a look at the past year. Consistently, on Google, software engineer has about double the traffic as software developer. Kind of makes sense. But we talk... Yeah, intuitively, I'm not sure that's the right way around. We talk about a software development agency. We don't talk, or software agency or a software house. We don't talk about a software engineering agency. However, engineering is very different from coding. Again, trying to think of an analogy that doesn't seem ridiculously old, but kind of like, just because you can change the spark plugs in an engine doesn't mean you know how to engineer a car. So it's kind of, software engineering is a much more complicated discipline than just coding. Coding is part of it. You need to know how to code because you need to know how things are put together. So because actually building software is a really weird discipline, because it's kind of like, I always say, and I've written this in a few books and done it in a few videos, that kind of like writing software is like building castles in the sky with your mind. Because when you're actually constructing software, you're not doing anything that has a physical manifestation. It's all purely logical. It's very freeing, but it also means you can make like tremendous mistakes. Like if you're trying to build a physical bridge, and you're doing it with concrete and steel, physics will tell you whether you've made a mistake, because the thing will fall down, and hopefully it will, fall down early doors without hurting anybody. But software doesn't do that. Software, you can kind of build anything you want. So to come back to this thing, rather than just blathering off ADHD style, become your own CTO. You need to learn how to code. So one of the things I think is really helpful when people are doing to understand how to do a technical discipline, what do you, if you look at other disciplines that you may also not know as much of because it's outside of your sphere, like for me it's really helpful to think, okay, imagine that someone was saying that to me about a CFO. Like, I'm not an accountant, I'm certainly not a chartered accountant, I'm also not a CMO, I'm not a chief marketing person, but I know enough about marketing, but I certainly don't know enough to replace those. And I think that's the problem with that statement. It was kind of like, become your own CTO, because you will negate the need to have it. You don't negate the need to have a CFO because you know how to read a balance sheet, right? You need to know how to read a balance sheet. You need to know how to read a profit and loss. You don't necessarily need to know how to put one together, but you need to know what it is. But it doesn't negate the need for it. And the implication is that if you just learn how to code, and the other thing is that people go along with this and say this is ridiculously simple, right? It's quite hard to learn how to code really well. Like, it's not easy. And this tends to be the sort of the message that people will say, actually learning how to code is really easy. It isn't. I mean, I learned it really early, so I couldn't really tell you how long I think it would take. And I kind of, looking back, I don't know anyone who I know who's learned how to do it from scratch. But I can't. I would struggle to tell you how long it takes to learn how to do it. I would say, I mean, they talk about this 10,000 hours idea, which is either apocryphal or true. So, like, if I've done about 75,000 hours in my career. If I divide that by, that's about 4 years full-time work to get to an expert level of something. Yeah, okay. And all right. So I'm gonna agree with that. If you sat down and you spent 4 years, 40 hours a week learning how to code, I think you could probably replace the job of a CTO. Similarly, if I spent 40 hours a week for 4 years full-time learning how to do accountancy, I could probably replace a CFO. I might not be a very good one. I think the value of this, there is value in that statement of you need to learn how to become your own CTO, because realistically you have to learn how the things that you need to bring into your business, you have to learn how to do. This is something that tends to catch out a lot of first-time founders who have spent 20 years in industry, so they're kind of like 40, 45, going on 50, and they want to start a business, which is that they've worked in an organization, and the clue is in that word, organization. They have worked with other people in that commercial organism that has specialized in certain tasks that makes their task easier. You know, this is why we organize ourselves. We have different organs which work in concert, and we get an organization. So, but you tend to forget a lot of the detail. So, for example, if you are, let's say you are somebody who is a management consultant, who's worked in a management consultancy firm, and you want to go out and start on your own, and you sit there and think, well, this is easy. I've got all these clients. I've done all this work. I've got this portfolio. I now need to go out there and actually run my own business, only to realize that there was 10 people in an office working 24/7 and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds a year building you a sales pipeline. And now you don't have that sales pipeline, and you sit there and you get a bit stuck. So yeah, you need to understand. So basically, I'm rambling around this one really a lot now. Becoming your own CTO is valid in that you need to know how to buy. You need to know how to buy technical experience and put it in your team. But can you do that yourself? Should you do that yourself? And I don't even necessarily think it is that useful. You kind of need to be able to select people who can explain things to you as if you're 5 years old, right? And they need to be right. That's the other thing. Ultimately you need to learn how to take advice. Like, one of the things that I look at when I think about trying to look at this from a different perspective is sales and marketing. Like, you don't have a business unless you are really profoundly good at sales and marketing. You need to build that operation within your business and get really good at it. And the times that I've done it, I've really fallen down the back of the sofa in not really knowing how to do it well enough in order to buy properly. I'll give you, for instance, like story time. It's one of the things you need to do with marketing is you need to spend an awful lot of money to move the needle, right? So you can't just do these little tiny... Logically, it seems sensible that you could go to, for example, LinkedIn, have a budget of £400, £500 and go, I'm just going to try running a few adverts to see if I start getting leads. But what no one tells you about that is that it's not enough, that you can't... If you do something really small like that, it's out of scale to how that solution works. The LinkedIn, for example, in that specific instance, and all the social networks are the same, but all marketing is the same to this. It's, unless you are spending at the scale the platform expects, you will not get results. It's not that you can run a £0 to £400 spend will not allow the algorithm to tune itself enough to find your audience to get your message right, even if you've got your message right. If you're spending £1,000 a month and you spend £400 in any 2 week period, you'll spend quote unquote £400. I realise that doesn't add up, but you get my point. You will see aggregate. You will be able to say that every £400 creates me one lead, two, well, hopefully more than that in terms of cost of acquisition, is creating me 20 leads, for example, but only when it's at speed and when it's got momentum. Now, if you are dependent on somebody giving you that advice and someone giving you the real talk, and in my experience, they don't. I think, and I'm not sure whether that is me not asking the right questions or being closed-minded. I think it is people kind of don't say. Like, people, it's very difficult to get... It is genuinely difficult now, I think, to get really good advice for free. I think it's like my LinkedIn feed is constantly full of people going, I will show you how to do this if you sign into my program, or kind of come and download this white paper, or go into my course. And you get these materials, and they don't, and I don't think people are doing it with kind of bad intent. It isn't enough. You need to have... This comes back to a problem. Well, okay, well, let's segue this nicely into a problem that first-time founders have, which is that nobody really wants to spend any money, and we kind of think we can do this with kind of sweat and with free resources. But realistically, you need a fair chunk of money in order to move any of these pieces together. If it was sufficiently easy that you could do it for free without any money down and with free resources, everyone would be doing it, and it would be a lot easier than it is, and it isn't. So yeah, for example, a post I did, I don't know, it might have gone out yesterday, which is talking about FF and F, or friend. So this traditionally stands for friends, families, and fools. And this is the sort of money that you get given without really an expectation that you're going to pay it back. And I'll come on to why I don't like fools being in that. But friends and family will give you money because they believe in you and they want to support you, but they're not necessarily seeing a return. Fools in that is a critical allusion to the fact that there are certain people who will put money into a business who won't do any due diligence and don't know they're not going to get their money back. So I prefer to call this friends, family, and followers. Which is people who kind of aren't in that core group of being your friends and family, but they kind of believe in you enough to kind of go, look, I'm going to give you a bit of money because do I trust it? So like FF&F model is effectively crowdsourcing, but with, not using little £50, £100 pledges, but kind of being more, I'll give you £5,000, £10,000, whatever. So FF&F is really important to a startup business because it's the capital that you need in order to start making meaningful expenditure in a way that is to scale with getting above kind of like this idea level. So one of the very first posts I did, which actually I nicked from somebody, which is that the value of an idea is always $12.99, right? The value of an idea that you have is always the cost of a book, because all you have to do, bare minimum, is express that idea in a book, which will run you ideally about 50,000, 70,000 words, and you publish it, and that idea is worth £12.99 in anyone's money. To get to that next level, to get to something where you have a properly trading business, where you have traction, you ultimately need to find some of this FF&F money, because if you don't, I'll tell you what, I'm going to turn the comments. I love the comments, I really do, but I get so distracted because my ADHD brain just gets lost. So thank you very much. Please do leave comments. It's really appreciated. I'll go back and look at them in the end and I'll reply. Let's just do that. Of course, if I happen to put this up on a podcast and you're in the car, then it's too late. But you can come and find me on LinkedIn. So the value of an idea is $12.99, and then you have to spend enough money in order to get out of that soup of everyone else's idea and start to get traction. And the only way you can do that, really, is by finding sum of money which is going to be something like £25,000, let's call it that. Now, one thing you can do is you can divert income. I'm not ignoring the cost of living crisis. I'm not ignoring the fact that there's not a lot of cash out there and inflation's bad and everything in the economy has been flatlining for 2 years and it's not looking like it's going to get better for another couple of years. But if you're able to say, I've got some savings, I've got some money that some FF&F is going to give me, I can divert some money in from my income. I'm going to do this carefully and with thought. And that is probably going to mean getting some paid support in earlier on. Then you're able to start building something and building a real business, right? But unless you do that, unless you're able to say, I notionally know where I can get hold of what is a large sum of money. I'd like to say it was about the same as a house deposit. It's probably about half as much as a house deposit. Well, probably about half as much as a house deposit plus moving costs. Do you need to do that in order to get a business moving? Yes, you do. This is good because this is actually going to segue, not deliberately, into the other thing I wanted to talk about. So, because once you do that, once you're able to get that FF&F money in and start doing the expenditure and doing things slowly and in a really considered way, you then are able to start getting to a point where you've got traction and you've got a proper business. So one of the things I spoke about on the last podcast, which surely nobody listened to, is that you kind of know when you got to traction when you're starting to raise invoices and you have a reasonable expectation of those invoices being paid. So those of you who've listened to a lot of my stuff kind of know I like these little rules to say this is what this is and this is how you identify this. And for me, traction is simply when you're invoicing somebody. And I'm going to come on to some other ideas when we talk about MMPs. Now, I'm really grateful to my friend Ailish for putting this in front of my brain, because some of you will know that I have felt like an old man shouting at traffic for a long time about the fact that there appears to have been this distortion in what people think are MVPs, right? So for me, an MVP has to be a real thing, right? But there is a lot of people out there talking how that you can build an MVP on what I think of as a prototypical basis. So you can say the point of any digital product you create in your technology business, going to come back to these rules. So my definition of a technology business is it is any business whereby the primary method in which value is delivered to the customer is digital in nature. This means that in order to have something that you use to deliver your value through a digital platform, it has to be a digital product. All digital products are effectively software, because even if you have a digital product which looks like hardware, for example, a Nest thermostat, that might not be a great example of that. A lot of the value is still coming from the fact that there is software behind it, right? Even a Ring doorbell, right? The value is in the software. So in order to have an MVP, in my head, you have to be able to sell that. So we come back to this idea that there is this prototypical way of building an MVP, which is where you say and go, and to link this up to the FF&F money, you sit there and go, I've notionally only got 12 months and £25,000, right? I can take £1,000 out of my month, £1,000 a month out of my income, and I can pay for those things there. I've got 10 grand from savings. That's quite a lot more money. That's nearly 36. And I've got like my dad, my uncle, whatever, will give me £5,000, right? So we've got our £27,000 in that case. Fine. But I really need to know if what I'm going to build is going to work. So that's a good reaction, I would say, to kind of like the life cycle of where MVPs come from. So the MVPs we get from a book by Eric Ries called The Lean Startup, which was published in 2012, which was a very different world. Primarily, I think a big reason why that's a very different world is because it means that generationally, the age of people who are starting startup businesses now would have been a bit earlier on in their career when they started to. They would have been earlier in their career than me, for example. So I know that when in between the years like 2002 and 2012 and before 2002, when people were building out digital products for their technology businesses, they would have this tremendous habit in that they would go, we're gonna write a spec, we're gonna find some money, we're gonna give that specification to a team of developers. They are gonna disappear into the basement. They're gonna come out blinking into like 9 months later, and they will produce something which is crap, because fundamentally they built what we told them to build. Let's assume that's always possible. So let's assume that is generally the case, that they haven't just screwed it up and built the wrong thing. But what we didn't do in that process, because we were doing this in a pre-MVP, pre-lean startup, pre-Eric Ries world, which was what we never tested any of these ideas with customers. So we come up with the idea in 2012 of the MVP, or the minimum viable product, which works really nicely with US audiences because they have this notion of an MVP, or a most valuable player in sport. And now, but the point of the MVPs in 2012 in the Lean Startup by Eric Ries was that you were still building a real piece of software. Now, over that past 10 years, and particularly over the past, like I would say, probably post-COVID period, weirdly, is that people have started to think about MVPs as not being actual software. So we get these ideas of prototypical solutions, which is where I can go and get my free copy of HubSpot, I can go and get my free copy of MailChimp. There are better solutions out there than MailChimp these days. HubSpot is not my favorite CRM, but it's a good free CRM. This is very much a sidebar. If you have some actual money, you don't need to go, like if you're a proper big enterprise, you go Dynamics or Salesforce. If you're a startup, don't use Salesforce, don't use Dynamics. Pipedrive is really good. If you're doing B2B SaaS, that would be my recommendation. I don't know why I've got sidebarred onto this. It's just basically because I don't like HubSpot very much, and I'm using it at the minute with a couple of businesses, and it irks me. So anyway, you're trying to build this prototypical MVP. So you go, I've got HubSpot, I've got MailChimp, I've got Google Sheets, I've got Zapier. I can link all these together. And I know that the way that I want to deliver this digital value to my customer looks like this, but I've got a CRM, I've got a way of communicating with customers through MailChimp, I've got a database in Google Sheets, and I've got a way of linking them all together with Zapier, right? So that is your kind of minimal, let's not call it minimum, your absolute bare bones way of building something. Then from that you can prototype solutions with that. Then you go one step above, which is kind of like I want to use a no code or a low code platform like Microsoft Power Apps, or I can't think of any other ones off the top of my head because I hate the thing so much, but that is me. But there's and if I start talking anyway, yeah, I just don't agree with them, and I'm trying to be devil's advocate. So, but you can then go and build. And people will promote the idea of building an MVP using prototypes or no-code or low-code solutions, which is where you put stuff in front of customers. Now, the point of putting stuff in front of customers is that you are going, I only have 12 months and £25,000, and if this doesn't work, I'm either going to start getting... A sensible thing for me to do might be to go back to my job. And that is kind of not what we want. We don't want someone who's 45 years old, who sits there and goes, I've had this passion for ages. I really want to go run my own business. I want to find the money. I want to make this work. That kind of person really needs to be supported, because what we don't want to do is then go back and go, oh, okay, great. Well, I guess I'm doing this until I'm 65, right? We also, on the flip side, don't want what can happen, as I have seen happen, which is horrendous, which is that you have something that isn't working and the founder can get so blinkered that they just keep putting good money after bad and doing things like, I'm nearly 50 and now I'm going to remortgage the house, and the house was nearly paid off because I bought it early, but now I'm not going to be able to pay it off before I'm 70, but I really believe in this and I kind of want to do it. So it kind of, you have to do it really carefully. So I get the argument that you have to really test your MVPs. But that has there's sort of this gravity now that's pulling what an MVP is. People perceive it as being as too prototypical. My argument with this, which I struggled to kind of, my argument with this, which is where I really struggle to kind of get this across, is that the entire software buying process fails miserably with MVPs at that level. It is not something that a customer can buy. And again, if we're talking about the mass of these sorts of solutions being B2B SaaS solutions, you are in an established world of how that software sales process goes. An interesting data point is that my posts that I do on software technology sales always do terribly. Like, no one picks up on, if I sit there and talk about how difficult it is to sell B2B SaaS solutions, this is how you can make it easier, for example, no one is interested in that. But it is core part of the life cycle of what you're trying to do. You cannot build a business without getting unbelievably good at software sales. And to bring us back to the MVP problem, if you have got a prototype, no code, low code MVP, you are disabling yourself in terms of being able to get through a proper business B2B buying process, because customers will not buy that. What they will buy, and again, I'm grateful to my friend Ailish for pointing this out to me, is that there is a thing called a minimal marketable product. Now, there are quite a few hits for this on Google, and I kind of, my sigh was because this happens in that you get, it's really, really difficult to get ideas to have like some momentum, and the MVP idea is so big and it's so embedded that you know, I'm now saying, oh no, there's a thing called MMP. It kind of, who's that? Is it going to get any traction? But the idea of a minimum marketable product is that it is something the customer can sell. This means that it is inherently compatible with the B2B sales process, and that is what you need to do. You need to have something where you can say to a customer, we have this solution that, I don't know, for example, lets people... So you can say to a business customer, you have got some people on staff who have ADHD. This is a piece of software that we have developed that helps someone with ADHD with their executive functioning and enables them to be more comfortable at work and find work a more pleasant experience and be more productive, right? So you could say to an organization, this is what we have done. And if you don't know that organization, let's say it's like Santander or kind of Tim Hortons. I don't really like Tim Hortons very much. I think it's a bit overpriced. Or McDonald's, or it's probably lunchtime, which is why I'm thinking about food things. If you want to go and talk to like someone in charge of human resources at those sorts of organizations, you are promising them a transformation. So the basis of all sales is that you are trying to position a transformation. You are saying to them, you have got this problem. Sorry, you are in fact, I like this more than kind of problem and pain. It's this transformation idea. You kind of say you are in a state, which, not in a negative way, but kind of like in an engineering way that we would describe something in. State A, you want to get to state B. You want to go through this transformative process. we've got this solution that enables that transformative process, right? So your state is that you have got a whole load of employees with ADHD, and you as a responsible employer want to support them better at work, and they as the people working in the organization want to feel comfortable in that environment. And let me tell you from experience that I've had with people who are really important to me, having ADHD in a normal workplace environment is awful. So you've got this genuine need, and we want to transform your organization into one where we want to deliver this value. So you go through this transformation so that you're able to get I'm going to be hard-nosed about this again, the value that you want to get from an employee, but also the employee is going to be having a better time at work. So it's a win-win, and if we're selling it to you, we're going to make money out of it. So it's a win-win-win. It's wins all round, right? You actually have to have something to sell them in order to go through that process. You can't say to the chief HR officer of Santander, you've got this problem, haven't you? Yeah, we do. We do have this problem, and it's important to me, and I want to kind of fix this problem. All right. We could deliver this. What do you think? Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. But it's not ready. You can't sell it. You don't have it yet, because all you have is an MVP. All you've got, and you can validate that as much as you like. I mean, the point of having that conversation is that is validation, to some value of validation, right? I don't necessarily agree with that, but you can kind of go to some people with ADHD, we want to build this, and here's a Figma prototype, or here's how we're going to this is how it's going to work, and this is what it's going to do, and kind of like you're doing journaling at the minute, and that kind of helps you with emotional regulation. So kind of like, we're going to put journaling in the app. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. No, I think I would use journaling in the app. So it's all of this kind of, oh yeah, I think I would do that. Okay, yeah, no, that seems to work. Yeah, I found that, blah, 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 blah. And you're validating your testing, which is what you want to do, but you don't have anything to sell. So you naturally hit this hard stop. You actually hit two hard stops with these MVP with these prototypical MVP problems. One is that you can't engage in a sales process. There is no sales cycle for it, because all you're saying is, if we did this, would you be interested? Yes. Cool. I'll call you back in 6 months. Yeah. What does that do for anybody? Apart from anything else, it leaves 6 months where anyone else with an actual solution can come in and say, well, now that Matt and his team have warmed you up to having this problem, here's our solution, and it's 20 quid a month. Do you want it? Oh, yes, please. Done. And then you go back and go, okay, I'm ready now. And it's like, well, yeah, we already moved on that. It was great. Thanks for your insight. Anyway, so MVPs, when done in order to validate your learnings, decrease the chances of you getting to the end of your 12 months and your 25 grand with regrets, but they're not very compatible with a sales process. There is another technical problem you have with those as well, which is that they are just delaying the point at which you have to build the real thing, right? You cannot build any product of any merit or any worth using those solutions. You have to, at some point, have a blank sheet of paper and engineer something properly. Looping back to my original point about do you need a fractional? Why is this saying I've only been online for 20 minutes when I've clearly been online for nearly 50? I don't know. Sorry. Yeah. So the point of a minimum marketable product is that it is compatible with a B2B selling process. I'm talking about B2B because most people will sell B2B. B2C is really very, very different. B2C, unless you have got a metric ton of cash, you're going to find it really, really hard to scale that business, because you need to rent an audience. So, which you don't have to do to the same extent when you're selling B2B. If you're selling B2C, you are going to have to rent an audience of some sort. You are going to have to rent an influencer and rent their audience. You are going to have to rent space on a social media platform to get your message out there. You are going to have to rent space on tube trains in London to put your adverts out. you have to spend, and that means you have to find a 7-figure sum somewhere. Realistically, I think there are more ideas in the B2B space, and there's more traction, more interest. But anyway, but you can do B2B on the cheap. It's not cheap, but it's cheaper than finding £1 million, right? So the idea, so what we're trying to do with the minimum viable product is we're trying to get away from the point that MVPs are not compatible with a B2B buying process. And again, I'm going to reiterate this through kind of a role play. Again, like, we've got this solution that lets you, Mr. House Builder or Mrs. House Builder, we have got this solution that when you're going around trying to hand over these you're doing domestic home building, when you're trying to hand over these properties, there's all these snags. We're going to do something that lets one of your inspectors go around, snag out everything that's going on, and kind of aggregate that onto a platform, and then proportion the remedial work out to the contractors, right? We're going to build that for you. So then Charles Church or Bovis, I don't know, whatever house builder, Persimmons, for example, will then come along and go, right, no, that sounds like a really good idea. We do have that problem. Yeah, it's really difficult for us to, everyone always complaining about the snags. What we need is we need a primary list of what's wrong with the property, and then we need to track those tickets as they go through the contractors before we hand it over. That sounds great. Cool. Can I use it? Yeah, we've got something that kind of works. And what is that? Is that the inspectors go around with WhatsApp and take pictures of the snags and put some text in, and then send that through to a virtual number you hold on Twilio, and then pull. How would you do that? Well, let's assume Zapier can read WhatsApp from Twilio. Might be able to. And then we're going to put that in a Google Sheet. And then what are we going to do then? How are we going to get the contractors to log in to see that? Can't have the contractor see everyone else's Google Sheet. So do we then? It kind of like yeah, I find it really difficult to even conceive how these things are built, because the proper way to build it is easier in my head. But anyway, that's me. That's my problem. So, but it kind of, for whoever is managing the quality at Persimmons, that sort of doesn't work. What does work is being able to give them something that may not be ready to sell. It may not be ready to go, but it looks like the real thing. Now, I have a rule, because as we know, I like rules, is that a minimum viable product, a minimum marketable product, should be no more than 5 engineering days away from being able to put one paying customer on it, right? So what I mean by that is that, yeah, this thing can be ropey, right? It may not have a forgot password feature. It may only be able to allow one contractor to log in. I mean, if those who are watching me are kind of like with a technical focus, don't worry too much about the cybersecurity problems that implies. Just go with it. But realistically, what you're saying is that I've got a mini sprint. I've got one engineer for 5 days that I can allocate enough little stories to, enough little work tasks to, who are going to turn this into something that I can actually then give to Persimmons or give to Santander, and I'm going to be able to invoice them for that. I'm going to be able to present to them at the end of the month an invoice that says, I've given you 2 users on this system or 3 users on this system at 50 quid a go. That invoice is going out, right? That is what a minimum marketable product is. Now, the challenge that you have is that you somehow have to get from there is no way I've only been talking for 22 minutes. Sorry, this is kind of bugging me now. How long was that said? No, this stream on YouTube says it's 40 minutes long, which is a bit more sensible, because I'm feeling pretty tired, to be honest. Anyway, I bet you guys are as well listening to this. Anyway, it's the problem with there is a big gap, a chasm even between MVP and MMP, which is that you can, with our budget of 12 months and £27,000, you can pretty much build any MVP on a prototypical basis if you want. You can even go and spend 10 grand with someone who's really good at product and help them with this validation, right? You could do that. That certainly leaves enough budget for business development, meetings, subscriptions, all of it. You could, maybe 10's a bit high, but certainly not, 7.5 maybe. You could do that. Can you get to an MMP for that sort of money with the budget that's left? I'm not sure you could. So that is, if you were, the attraction of these prototypical solutions is that you can kind of DIY, right? You don't need to have a specialist contractor come in and do this work for you. If you are building an MMP, you are going to need to find a specialist. You are going to need to find a software engineer to do it. Could you, and I haven't really been promoting this as an option, but there are ways in which you can do, like you could find a friend who knew how to code and was going to do it in their spare time, or a friend's kid who was at uni or going to uni who was good at coding, e.g. Or was of that sort of age necessarily, whether their life path took them to uni or not. You could offshore development of an MMP. You could almost certainly do that for £25,000 if you had the right support. So that would always fail, I would say, if you didn't have someone who understood how to build software and who was effectively leading that project for you. So you'd need to have someone technical come in and select a vendor and run the project and specify it. But you could do it. That would work. But then you're trying to find a bit more money. But maybe you're okay at that point because you've got... you'd need to find a bit more FF&F than 25,000 to do it. You'd need to find about 20,000 to do the offshoring. So could you get someone to come in for about 5,000 and then do your product development and do your customer validation? 6 months, 5 grand, know what you're going to build, find a bit more money, outsource it, but outsource it well. Yeah, you could probably get to an MMP for that. But yeah, anyway, again, so grateful to my friend Adish for pointing this out, because this is what I've been struggling with. It is the fact that you cannot get an MVP through a B2B sales cycle, but you can get an MMP through a B2B sales cycle because it's roughly there. Like, all you have to do is just the little bits of technical debt that you've collected through not building the stuff that you need to switch a customer onto the platform. If that could be ready to go. Your MMP could be, it doesn't need any more engineering in order to work, but it could also be, it's just a week's effort, and then you're actually selling it, and then you've got your first customer, and then you can go, all right, I've got my minimum marketable product, but now I need to do a little bit more work to get it back up to what I intuitively want to call an MVP, ironically, which is an actual proper MVP, but kind of like, what is that next stage? And I think you could do that. So I'm probably going to say that I have been streaming. Actually, OBS will tell me more. Yeah, OBS tells me I've been streaming for 50 minutes, which is why I'm tired. Thanks very much for listening. Please do. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have. I quite like doing these lives. They're really good, but I do really get distracted by the comments, so I do apologise for ignoring everybody, but I'll try and mop up that as well. Please do go and look at merch.fractionalmat.com to see whether there's any mugs you want to buy, but you can either go today, which would be fantastic, or as I say, there'll be a new one going up tomorrow. And what do I need to do now? I need to do a video. I haven't done a video in a week, which is really bad of me, because I try to do 1 or 2 a week and I haven't done one in 8 days. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me this morning, and I will catch you next time.